And we are back. The FBI decided to place an undercover agent into the operation. The agent is only ever known as JJ. All right. He posed as a drug kingpin. Undercover agents needed to have a background story and, just stories to tell. They need a history. It's kind of like that scene in Reservoir Dogs. You remember that where
Yeah, oh yeah,
they're
yeah.
going over with him. You
Mhm.
need to have stories, and you need to know it cold.
Your name,
Right.
where you went to school, and the background must be particular to the area you're operating in. Like, for example, in New Orleans, everybody knows that when they ask where you went to school, if you went to college, you don't talk about where you went to college. You talk about where you went to high school.
That's right, where you went
Yeah.
to high school. Yes.
Yeah. So have knowledge pertaining to your cover story and all that stuff. Because I story for another time. I did something similar to that. I worked plainclothes one time, and I had an interesting cover story.
Okay, you're right.
Including an alias that I used in a certain role playing game, which made my alias that all the more natural. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
All right. Well, so also though, Brian, that if you're an undercover agent, that's a very big deal. It's a great risk to your life as well.
Yeah.
And keep in mind as well that
or even working plain clothes.
Even working plain clothes.
Either way, you're pretending you're somebody else.
Right.
So if you're assaulted because you believe to be a police officer, that's like one less thing to defend you. You're not. No one sees this uniform and this badge.
Right. So the story in this case is that JJ. He's only ever known as JJ. All right.
He's dynamite.
So the story is that he was Terry's supplier, and he wanted to have a drug storage hub in the city of New Orleans. So the two men had to know their common history, and they worked together to establish their stories. They created false memories, habits, and people that they both knew. They would go over the stories again and again and again. Even though JJ was experienced and smart, his life was in the hands of Terry Adams, who did not have any experience with this. Okay? Now remember that they're trying to catch corrupt police officers. These police officers could search their histories. These police officers could kill them and get away with it.
Yes, quite easily.
All
yes,
right.
who's watching the watcher?
Yeah, who's watching the watcher? Okay. So again, the great personal risk involved, right?
Yeah, we're also talking about an age when the NOPD was just like today. Their internal affairs was very nitpicky.
Mm-hmm.
And going after soft targets within the department. Just like they've been doing right now, although it's only just now coming to light.
Right. That's another discussion, though.
Yes.
In April of 1994, JJ and Terry met at a hotel. Len Davis and Sammy Williams observed as JJ dropped the payment to Terry, and the two men were convincing enough that the officers agreed to meet JJ a few weeks later. In order to establish trust, JJ, Sammy Williams, and Len Davis stripped down together in a motel room. Of course, they were doing this to prove that they weren't wired. However, even though JJ wasn't wired, do you know what was wired, Brian?
The room itself.
The room itself. That's correct. They had surveillance videos. They had audio recording equipment. And in a bold move, JJ invited the officers to search the room. Again, another risk, right?
Yep.
But hey, those FBI technicians, they did their job.
Yep.
Okay, that's pretty incredible when you think about it, because these are people who know how to search. They somehow missed the wire on Terry Adams, and they missed all of the recording equipment in the motel room.
Yeah, keep in mind, FBI technicians are agents, but they're in the FBI primarily because they have a certain technical specialty.
Right.
And for example, like their commission and their carrying of a firearm is for their protection.
Mm.
So don't expect them to be of a lot of use if you're going to assault a building.
Not for the technicians,
right?
But there are like FBI SWAT teams,
right, yeah. FBI SWAT and SRT, which is even more specialized in FBI SWAT. Yes, so so these technicians do a job. It's not a glorious job like you'll see in movies, but technicians are the backbone of the FBI. It's what they are what makes the FBI literally work.
So they're like the service workers.
Yes.
Right, of the restaurant industry. They're like the waiters and waitresses. They have a very important job.
Yes, they do.
Okay.
And the jobs of everybody else in the FBI is very much dependent upon these technicians.
We see you, technicians.
Just the same as, say, an FBI medical examiner.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing.
Oh, okay. So this gamble paid off, and once the trust had been established, JJ told Len Davis and Sammy Williams that he was a drug dealer from New York. His objective was to use New Orleans as a cocaine storage hub only. He wanted to rent a warehouse to store the drugs and use New Orleans police officers to guard the warehouse. Now,
this does sound like the plot of a Mac Bowen novel.
Okay, yeah.
Mac Bowen. Now, as far as like Mac Bowen, Mac Bowen's actually what inspired Marvel's The Punisher.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
There was quite a few novels that were written from the 60s, 70s, 80s. I read several of them.
Yes, you have.
Action, adventure, romance novels.
But for dudes?
But for dudes that actually involved, good tactics and good information on weapons, all that stuff.
I really love that. I love that something like that exists in this world that, anybody can enjoy. You don't just have to be a dude to enjoy Mac Bowen, but it was probably written with men in mind.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, most definitely. Yes, I confess I read several Mac Bowen novels as a teenager. My sister was rather annoyed about
it. All right. Well, JJ offered the officers $5,000 a day to guard the warehouse. Len Davis and Sammy Williams, blinded by greed, went for it. Of course they did.
Well, Len Davis was already pretty much a crook, a corrupt cop by that time, so of course he went for it.
The officers even gave JJ some advice on how to do this properly. Okay, they said, "Hey, why don't you purchase trucks and put the company name on the sides of the trucks, right? Hire some young drivers, get them some uniforms and name tags and everything." So they were like really trying to make this look legit. Right? I mean, it's kind of funny when you think about it. They're trying to make their illegal activity look legit.
Of course, yeah.
Of course, yes.
It's organized crime.
Correct. It is organized crime. After all of this, somehow the officer said the magic word cocaine. They said it clearly, and of course it was on tape. For the FBI, the meeting went perfectly. Soon after that meeting, the FBI very kindly procured a warehouse. Wasn't that nice of them, Brian?
Oh, yes, most definitely. Yeah.
JJ,
you can always count on the government to spend money.
All right. JJ and the officers met there to do a walkthrough. They were told how often to expect the movement of the cocaine and when the money would start to roll in. During this meeting, Len Davis told JJ that he had 6 officers ready to guard the warehouse. The FBI had to make sure the case was airtight. In order to prosecute any officers guarding the warehouse, they would have to prove that the officers knew that they were guarding cocaine. Okay? Like, because otherwise it would just give them plausible deniability. They could just say, well, we didn't know it was in those bags.
Yeah, I can totally see that. And in that situation, if you're guarding, there are situations where even security guards don't know what they're guarding.
Right.
You see, like if you're guarding the perimeter of a warehouse, you may not be told what's in that warehouse or anything about the company, just that you're not supposed to let anybody in, or you're told only let these certain people in.
Brian, he keeps dropping his phone. Stop dropping your phone. All right, I'll tell you what, we're going to take a quick break. How about that? Be right back, folks. And we are back. And Brian, do you have control of your phones?
Yes.
Okay, good. So, after the FBI procured the warehouse, the shipments came in about once a month. And of course, the warehouse was completely wired. Hidden cameras, audio recording capabilities, the works. So, everything would be on tape because it had to be. When the shipments were coming in, the officers made sure that they weren't looking at the shipments. But as the summer months came, an agent disguised as a courier unloaded a shipment in plain view of the officers. The officers called Len Davis on a cell phone that JJ had given them. And gee, Brian, wasn't it nice of the FBI to give them a cell phone with so many nice additional features on it?
Oh yes. all those hidden features that you don't know about because either you just don't know they're there or you just didn't want to read the instruction book.
So, of course, Len Davis was furious. JJ and Terry sped into the parking lot and they confronted the courier. Now, keep in mind, the courier is an FBI agent. All right. So this is a staged argument between the 3 men.
Mm-hmm.
They made sure that the officers heard them yelling about the drugs as well.
Yep.
Okay. So if the officers hear an argument about, cocaine,
mm-hmm.
It is, of course, the officer's duty to search and make arrest.
Probable cause.
Probable cause, correct?
That's right.
Well, the officers did not do this, of course. And the officers saw the cocaine shipment as well. So they knew what it was. They both heard the words cocaine and they saw the cocaine.
Yep.
All right. Sammy Williams was called, and he was also recorded arguing with the men about cocaine.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And this was another risk that worked. It proved that the cops knew exactly what was in the warehouse.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, Brian, how hot does it get out here in the summertime?
Extremely hot.
Extremely hot.
You can expect mid to high 90s.
And humidity.
Humidity can easily bring it over 100.
So, what is one thing that you would not want to be doing during the summer months?
Standing outside for a long time.
Or sitting in a car, right?
Yeah, without the AC running.
However, the AC running in the vehicles, police vehicles all day,
yes,
was taking a strain.
Yes, of course.
So, of course, the FBI is recording all of the officers complaining about the heat, wear and tear on the equipment.
Mm-hmm.
So, the officers requested a more comfortable vehicle, which again, the FBI was only too happy to provide one.
So nice of the your friendly neighborhood FBI.
Everybody gets one.
Yep. Yep. You get a car. You get a car. You get a car.
Well,
for your cocaine detail.
well, of course, this vehicle was rigged with, again, hidden cameras, audio recording equipment, all of these things.
Yeah, they just threw in some great stuff with that car deal,
A lot of bells and whistles.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it was a brand new van, by the way. Brand new. This was not some clunker.
And with no money down, let her have it.
All right, for those
Frankie and Johnny's.
For those of you who don't know, and you could probably find the ads on YouTube.
Definitely.
There was a furniture store called Frankie and Johnny's. And their ads were, just local furniture ads. I'm sure that everybody has them in their own towns and cities, right? There's always those local ads that you'd never forget. And these were just completely memorable. Just look up Frankie and Johnny furniture ads on YouTube and you'll be able to see what we're talking about.
Yeah, always an outrageous and comical character. Which, of course, gets your attention.
Always, yes.
Becomes iconic.
So Len Davis at this point trusted JJ completely. When the officers asked if the van could have been tampered with, Len Davis told them that he picked it out himself. He straight up lied. Straight up lied to his officers.
Oh, well, officers in charge of a detail or higher ranking officers, they never lie to officers working below them. No. Never ever.
Would never happen.
Yeah. You hear that, Mark DeFillo?
I don't know if Mark DeFillo listens to us, but
yeah, probably doesn't. But I won't go into it. Yeah, Mark DeFillo, what a piece of work.
Okay. Well,
Marlon DeFillo. Oh. Never mind.
Are you done?
Yeah.
You okay?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. One night, the officers working the overnight shift brought women into the van for a sexual encounter. When the FBI monitor heard them having sex, she called JJ. JJ called Len Davis. He said that he drove by the warehouse and saw the officers partying with the girls. And he reminded Len Davis that he wasn't paying the officers to have sex. And he told him to handle it. Len Davis was furious. They could have, of course, he feels like these officers could have blown the operation. And he removed the officers from the detail. All right. The incident raised suspicion amongst the cops.
Which is actually legitimate.
It is. Yeah, you're right. It is legitimate.
Yeah.
The cops believed that JJ was a problem. They discussed killing him. And yes, this conversation was recorded, and the FBI monitor, of course, tipped off JJ. This meant that the FBI would have to start to wrap up the operation. And JJ continued to play his role very, very well. He had Len Davis convinced that another shipment would arrive in the winter, and then he planned to change warehouses. Len Davis was carefully observing JJ during this time. He would count how many times JJ would use words like cocaine, drugs, and dope, and he would tell him, you used the word cocaine 5 times just now. Okay. So the FBI was changing routes and delivery times to keep the cops off balance as well. Spread it out. Never attack the same fence twice.
Yep.
Right? Due to the amount of corrupt officers, the FBI needed an insider that they could trust so that a full sweep could be done. Do you happen to remember what one of the things that went on in October of 1994, Brian?
Refresh my memory.
That's when
Okay.
Richard Pennington was appointed chief of police of the New Orleans
Yes,
Police Department.
that's right. That's right. That's right. A reformer there.
A reformer,
Yeah,
exactly.
hiring practice. He at a certain point he changed hiring practices,
But most importantly,
increased requirements.
he was an outsider.
Yes.
Okay, he had nothing to do with anything that was going on within the New Orleans Police Department at that time.
He didn't owe anybody anything, and I mean his appointment was one of the hallmarks of
Was it Morial?
Mark Morial,
Yeah, Mark Morial,
the son of Ernest Dutch Morial.
They were mayors, by
yeah.
the way.
Mark Morial's tenure in New Orleans, which is 2 terms, Pennington was one of the hallmarks of his tenure.
Yes.
Yeah, many people would tell you that Mark Morial was the last good mayor of New Orleans that we had.
But that's another discussion.
Yeah, another discussion.
The FBI met with Richard Pennington immediately, and he agreed to cooperate with them because, of course, he did. Why wouldn't he? Like you said, Brian, he didn't know anybody to anything within the New Orleans Police Department.
Yep.
Right? And, of course, throughout all of this, Len Davis and Sammy Williams were still on active duty. One October night, the 2 officers were patrolling the Desire housing projects when they harassed and beat a teenage boy. They left him bleeding in the streets, and his aunt, Kim Groves, filed a complaint against Len Davis and Sammy Williams the very next day. She was a 32-year-old mother of 3. She was working to support her family, and when Len Davis was told about the complaint, he was very, very, very mad. He knew that a complaint would get him unwanted attention just as the new police chief was coming into the department. Len Davis decided that Kim Groves had to die. And just hours after Richard Pennington was sworn in as the new chief of police, the FBI recorded a conversation between Len Davis and an unknown male. Len Davis asked the man for a 30 on Kim Groves.
Yeah, signal 30 is a murder.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So Len Davis was using police code to arrange for the murder of Kim Groves, a woman whose crime, quote unquote, alleged crime, was that she dared to file a complaint against a corrupt police officer. That was her only. That's no reason to die. She was doing the right thing.
Yeah.
But she got killed for it.
A detractor spread the rumor that she was a drug dealer.
Oh, okay.
And there were police officers who believed it.
Of course.
I confess at the time I believed it too.
Okay.
We all get subjected to that, things that we believe at the time because of who we hear it from. Only to find out later on that it was false. I mean, this is one of those things.
Okay, yeah. So everybody keep that in mind too. Not everything you hear is correct.
And this was one of the things. This was said in Harry Potter. No one is who they appear to be.
No one is who they appear to be.
That was very much true of Len Davis.
Very, very wise words.
People even just acquainted with him, like myself, found that out later on, of course, about him.
But, since he used the code, the FBI didn't know what he was talking about. But not long after that conversation, another one was recorded on Len Davis's cell phone. This one happened right as the police dispatcher announced a homicide in the housing projects. On the phone, Len Davis exclaimed with joy when he learned of Kim Groves' death. Joy, happiness.
Yeah, when the recording of him requesting it, where at the end of it he says, "Call me when it's done," it sounds like he's like your favorite uncle requesting you to run an errand. That's kind of his demeanor on the recording. I remember hearing it.
So just very casual, just ordering the murder of an innocent woman.
Yeah,
right.
In true sociopathic fashion, ordering the murder of a woman in the same way that he would
order a burger at the drive-thru.
Yeah, or order a po' boy.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, after that phone call, the agents were shocked and they were disturbed by this. I mean, I would be too. I mean, it's one thing to have officers guarding cocaine and you getting money from that, but this is another thing.
Yes. Lots of people commit narcotics crimes. Okay, but not everyone. Violent offenders are actually a minority of the offenders sitting in jail.
Right.
Keep in mind, very few members of society actually murder people. That's a minority of criminal offenders. It gets all the news, of course, and everyone's looking for murderers around every corner. And some people are ignorant enough to think, you look at this jail and, it's full of killers. No, the jailhouse is not full of killers. There's a handful in there, very small. But no, it's not populated by killers in general. No. So this is very unusual. It's very shocking. In general, yes, members of law enforcement, especially feds, it's a shocking experience for them to encounter a full-blown sociopath.
It did not take long for the FBI to learn that the man who actually pulled the trigger was named Paul Hardy. And at this time as well, Len Davis was planning to kill JJ. Okay, he was planning to kill JJ. During this time, one of the officers in the department who was assisting the FBI got a copy of Kim Groves' obituary and a threatening note. The message was clear. Death would come to those who talked. And
it's typical in an organized crime operation.
Very true.
Yeah. Yes. And someone like Len Davis is well capable of carrying it out.
The FBI had recorded 5 conversations that took place in the warehouse. The cops in these conversations were discussing the best way to kill the couriers who delivered the cocaine.
What an interesting topic of discussion.
They then planned to steal the drugs and sell the cocaine themselves. Of course. Of course.
Yeah. Just having this discussion within the same context as you would say a game of
chess, Risk.
You could say that, but say a video game.
Okay.
Some cooperative video game. It's being discussed within the same context.
All right. So the FBI decided that it was time to start wrapping up the operation. In order to capture the corrupt officers, they needed the perfect trap. And we're going to get to that discussion when we come back after this quick break. And we are back. So in order to have the advantage, the FBI needed a place that they could mobilize and cut off escape access. And they also had to consider the risk to citizens if a shootout was to happen. They decided upon a truck stop on a main highway, Elysian Fields Avenue, which is...
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's very... Elysian Fields is very iconic to New Orleans and very important because it literally links the lakefront University of New Orleans area, Lakeview, part of Lakeview, all the way down to the Mississippi River.
All the way down the French Quarter.
Where the French Quarter is.
Mm-hmm.
So very important, very iconic.
Yes. And their plan was that the shipment was going to come on an 18-wheeler. It would be unloaded and put into different cars, two different cars, and then the officers would escort the couriers out of the city. 85 agents were positioned along the routes. And on November the 18th of 1994, the plan swung into action. As the truck pulled in, Sammy Williams, Len Davis, and the recruited officers were standing by. The cocaine was divided into the two different cars, and the surveillance video captured the officers escorting the vehicles to the eastern and western borders of the city. And as this was going on, the FBI arrested Paul Hardy for his part in the murder of Kim Groves. When they searched Paul's apartment, they found a police code guide, and they also found the murder weapon. Okay, so Mr. Paul Hardy had, now these police code books are not just to be given to anybody.
Oh, wow. That's common information.
But he had an unauthorized copy of like a police copy, something like that. He had a copy of the code guide he was supposed to have.
Okay. You're talking about something deeper than just the basic stuff that corresponds with the criminal code,
right?
Law or article,
right?
Yeah.
Okay. So this was, pretty damning evidence. All right. So they got him. Now, on December the 5th of 1994, the FBI arrested Len Davis at his home on drug trafficking and murder charges. The same day, the FBI arrested Sammy Williams. Now, they wanted to flip Sammy Williams to the prosecutor's side. And at this point, JJ's cover was revealed to him. And stunned by this, Sammy Williams knew that they had an airtight case against him. So guess what he did?
He flipped.
He flipped. He just knew that they had him. There was no way he was going to get out of this.
Yep.
Okay. So, on December the 7th, the FBI asked the other officers, all of the little henchmen, to come in and give handwriting samples. And this is where they arrested those officers, right there in the FBI office. Okay. And that ended Operation Shattered Shield, more or less. All the bad guys got put away. Len Davis currently sits on federal death row at the United States Penitentiary in Terre Haute, Indiana. And, this week's story was an interesting one. This had a lot of intrigue, danger, and triumph. I mean, there was so much risk involved on the FBI's part to get these officers arrested. And I'm going to have to say it. I think Terry Adams is one of the real heroes of the story, too. I mean, he didn't have to call the FBI. He didn't have to tip off anybody. He just knew that he was tired of being pushed around by Sammy Williams, and that's what prompted him to do this and go so deeply undercover.
We have another moral of the story. Anyone can pretty much redeem themselves.
Mm-hmm. Anybody can pretty much redeem themselves. Okay? So there you go.
So part of this is a redemption story for someone who is a lesser known public figure.
Yes, and quite brave too. I mean, that could not have been easy to keep that up for so long.
No, to be a confidential informant is a very brave thing to do.
It is a brave thing.
It takes more bravery than working undercover or playing close to be a confidential informant.
Yes.
Just keep in mind, law enforcement does not necessarily care about you if you're a confidential informant. Although the higher up, the more they do care.
Right.
They care more about you if you're a CI at the federal level than the local level.
That's probably true. But in any case, this story, okay, had, it had a lot in it. Now, this is a very public thing that is known. If you go into Google, you go onto YouTube or whatever, you can find this story. Okay. But the stories that you're not going to find right away are the ones, or these other things that Len Davis touched. He was so corrupt that there were people who were in jail for him because of lies that he told. These people were actually innocent.
Yep.
And as a matter of fact, as recently as this year, there were people who were released that were in jail that Len Davis lied about, and they were in jail because he lied about them.
Yes, yeah, his conviction tainted a bunch of cases he was involved with.
And we're going to talk about one of those cases in next week's episode.
Well, how fun.
How fun. So, Brian, what did you think of all this? I know that you worked in the department at that time. Well, the day that Len Davis was arrested, do you remember that day?
Whether you were involved in that situation or not, or even if you were just acquainted with Len Davis within the department, it sent chills up your spine. It was a shock. It was this story sent shockwaves throughout the New Orleans Police Department
and the city as well.
Yeah,
citizens.
No one was in.
Don't want to hear that their police force is doing this.
Right. No one was in greater shock than members of the New Orleans Police Department, even members of the Reserve Division of the Police Department. Is anyone acquainted with Len Davis who was not involved with him in this operation felt the shock very profoundly. It's that realization that someone literally wasn't who you thought them to be. And that the rumors that you discounted, that you didn't believe, the dirty things you heard about and that you didn't want to believe because of the source of this talk was quite true. Perhaps exaggerated at times, but very true. So initially it kind of felt like a nightmare. I had trouble sleeping that night when it all came out. And like many of us just couldn't believe our ears.
That's a very human reaction.
Yeah. And many of us generally just didn't talk about it for a while. Even if you were acquainted with Len Davis at the time, you didn't really want to discuss it. It was a very uncomfortable topic. Finding out that someone you knew
was just capable of such things,
right? Was this
terrible person?
Yeah, terrible criminal, sociopath, thug type for real.
Yeah, and like you said, organized crime.
Yes, organized crime that during the 90s was said to have been
pretty bad.
What was said to have been gone from the department. Okay, and it turns out like the reason why during the 90s it was openly discussed that during the 50s and 60s mafia ran the NOPD was because it was like, okay, the mafia was that boogeyman that was gone. See what I'm saying? Yes. So it was no problem talking about that and everything. So everyone's saying, that was the mafia in the 50s and the 60s, and no, that's not happening anymore. The NOPD. Wow. So turned out that the NOPD was still very fertile for organized crime on a lower level. Within the department.
Yes. And just so everybody knows this, and this was something that, this made me sad. Okay. In October of 1995, so about a year after Kim Groves passed away, her children filed a suit against the NOPD. And, it was not until 2018 that the judgment was granted. And the settlement was an amount of $1.5 million. And the city paid that amount over the period of 4 years. So 2018, that's not terribly long ago.
Nope.
Okay, it's only 5 years ago. And that means that hopefully they have all of their money now, but it shouldn't have taken that long. It should not have taken that long.
It shouldn't have. And you see, that's one of the unfortunate consequences for a state lawsuit against the city of New Orleans. It takes you forever to collect, and the city of New Orleans hopes you die before you have a chance to collect. You can collect much faster if you sue the city of New Orleans in federal court. That's the upside to suing them in federal court. The downside to suing them in federal court is it's going to cost you more money. And chances are, if you're suing the city of New Orleans on a contingency, you might only be able to get someone to do it in state court.
Right.
Although there are some attorneys who've changed their approach there and will go federal. But unfortunately, if you're going to sue the city of New Orleans on a contingency in federal court, it's going to have to be something big, because it costs more to file suit in federal court, to pursue a federal suit. It costs you more. Okay, so if an attorney's going to take that in contingency, it can't be something that's worth $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. I know someone who has personal experience with that.
Right.
So I say less than $10,000, you forget about a federal suit.
Oh, okay.
It's not going to be enough for an attorney on contingency. The attorney's only going to get, say, $3,000 out of a possible $10,000 settlement. They're not going to want to go federal with that.
No, they're not.
There's just not enough in there. So I mean, $3,000. You file a federal lawsuit. I mean, you're gonna sneeze, and that's $3,000 gone.
You're right.
You're
right.
Much more expensive.
You're right. And I just want to also point out that if we ever get some tort reform going, which probably won't happen, these things, these settlements that families file on behalf of losing a loved one would go faster.
Yes, okay. They would.
So, maybe, if you're listening to this, when you look at your local elections, see if any of the candidates have tort reform on their ballot, because it's pretty important.
Yes.
Okay.
Agreed. Yes.
All right, everybody. So that's going to wrap it up for this week. I really enjoyed this episode. I enjoyed learning about just how much effort was put into catching so many dirty cops. And there was a big operation by the FBI, like I said, full of risk and full of luck too.
Yeah, well, the two favorite targets, essentially, of the FBI are corrupt public officials, number one, and number two, corrupt law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
And that's people who were surprised when the FBI in Louisiana put their Baton Rouge field office in the state capitol, the first floor of the state capitol. To me, that was no surprise, because that put them right where they need to be in Baton Rouge, because a corrupt official in city of Baton Rouge or corrupt legislator, there you go. You're in the capitol right there.
You're in the capitol right there.
Yeah, not set up inside of an old Chase bank, like the FBI Baton Rouge headquarters was for the Disney Plus series National Treasure.
Right.
Which is filmed mostly in Baton Rouge, and somewhere in there I'm in the FBI office as an FBI agent.
That's right.
Playing at my desk or walking around, even at one point entering and leaving the building. It was a lot of fun, and there were even fake case files on my desk. Apparently, my agent character was an accountant because I had statements from a veterinary clinic on the desk. I was investigating corruption involving a veterinary clinic. You know. my punishment for having a desk pop while on the HRT, you know.
Yeah.
The bullet just hit. You know, we're goofing off on the set, coming up with our backstories, and I'm saying, well, all I did was put a hole in the Sachs desk. We didn't kill nobody.
Okay. All right, dear listeners. Until next time, be safe, be kind. Don't park next to vans. Remember that we're all human beings, and go watch National Treasure on Disney Plus. We are not sponsored by them, by the way.
Nope, not at all. But we love Disney Plus. And if you are, and if it is dangerous and it's dark, you don't feel safe, don't go there. In the first place, be your own defense attorney on the street and negotiate your own best possible outcome before you need a real attorney. And if you are being questioned by law enforcement in a professional capacity and you're not the victim or the witness to a crime, lawyer up. And side note, if you're asked to guard a warehouse as a security person of any kind, make sure the company's properly vetted.
Yes, make sure the company's properly vetted. Google it. Although, maybe the feds do have capabilities to create fake Google results now. I wouldn't be surprised.
Nah, it wouldn't surprise me neither.
So be careful, everybody. Again, consider the source.
Be careful. If you can't be good, be careful. But be good.
And if you can't be good at it. Until next time. And we are back. So in order to have the advantage, the FBI needed a place they could mobilize. They also had to consider the risk to citizens if a shootout was to happen. So they decided upon a truck stop on a main highway, Elysian Fields Avenue, which is
probably the one next to the Lowe's.
The one.
The only truck stop I know from Elysian Fields Avenue. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
Not much of Elysian Fields is suitable for a truck stop. That part is. It's right next to a Lowe's.
It is right next to
Which makes it a suitable spot for a truck stop.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly where it was. So now today I learned that truck stop has been in business for over 20 years.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow.
We should put a plaque there.
But also, I mean, Elysian Fields Avenue runs a very long way through the city. Like, it runs from the lake to the river.
Yeah, they should put a plaque at the truck stop. This truck stop helped to take down Len Davis.
Well, when word was put to Len Davis that the largest shipment was about to come, and of course needed more officers to guard all this extra cocaine, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the shipment would come in on an 18-wheeler. It would be unloaded and put into 2 different vehicles. Then officers would escort the couriers out of the city. 85 FBI agents were positioned along the 2 routes. Then on November 18th, 1994, the plan swung into action. As the truck pulled in, Sammy Williams, Len Davis, and the recruited officers were standing by. The cocaine was divided into 2 different cars, and the surveillance video captured the officers escorting the vehicles to the eastern and western borders of the city. And as this was going on, the FBI arrested Paul Hardy for his part in the murder of Kim Groves. And Brian, when they searched his apartment, they found an unauthorized copy of a code book that's used by law enforcement.
Yeah, now this is not the code book that, of course, every criminal justice majors would have. Okay. Whereas each code corresponds to Louisiana State Criminal Code. Okay. Like Signal 30 is murder. Okay, that's Article 30 of the Louisiana State Criminal Code is murder. Okay, we're not talking about that.
Right.
Anybody can look that up on the internet. But a literal code book that is not meant for public consumption,
Right.
is what we're referring to here.
Yes. And they also found the murder weapon, the 9mm handgun. So
Very typical, as 9mm was the rage of the 90s for handgun calibers.
So Paul Hardy is arrested for the murder of Kim Groves. Then on December the 5th of 1994, the FBI arrested Len Davis at his home on drug trafficking and murder charges. And then the same day, the FBI arrested Sammy Williams. The FBI wanted to flip Sammy Williams to the prosecution side. And it was at this point that JJ revealed his cover to Sammy Williams. And guess what? Guess what Sammy Williams did, Brian?
He flipped.
He flipped.
He flipped like a hotcake.
He knew that there was no way that he was going to be able to get out of this, right? This isn't like, basically his right to remain silent was completely gone because they already knew everything.
Yeah. There was absolutely no point in exercising your right to remain silent other than just save your breath.
Save your breath.
So he knew he had to do something.
And the testimony of Sammy Williams played a very important role in securing convictions for the other corrupt cops. Okay, so this was a really nice feather in the cap of this investigation. Then on December the 7th, the FBI asked the henchman officers, so the ones who were just guarding the warehouse, to come into their field office and give handwriting samples, which they did. And while they were there, guess what happened to them?
They were arrested.
They were arrested right there in that office. Yes, sir.
Yes. It's now that's something a cop is more likely to believe, that you're coming to submit a handwriting sample.
Yes.
Like non-cops, for example, they might try something like during the 90s, this was particularly effective, where they call you to let you know that you won something. To come and claim the prize.
Oh.
They'll try to convince you that you put in to win something in a certain location.
It's a major award?
Yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And with the arrests, came convictions, trials, etc., etc. But at the end of it all, Len Davis, he currently sits on federal death row in the United States Penitentiary in Terre Haute, Indiana.
Yes, they put him someplace else so that he wouldn't be anywhere near anyone who he may have dealt with in this state.
That's very true, too.
Yeah.
Yes.
Local law enforcement, the feds will move you to another state.
In October of 1995, the children of Kim Groves had filed a suit against the NOPD, but it wasn't until 2018 that the family was granted their settlement of $1.5 million, and the city paid the amount over 4 years. So this was just 5 years ago from a lawsuit they filed in 1995. It shouldn't have taken that long.
No surprise. The city of New Orleans hopes that you die before you collect from them.
Well,
or even complete your litigation.
Mm.
Yeah, it's more expensive, but it's better to sue the city of New Orleans in federal court. But it can be difficult to get an attorney to accept a federal lawsuit against the city of New Orleans on contingency.
Right.
There has to be enough damages recovered to where, say, the
lawyer gets paid.
Right, the lawyer gets paid enough to make it really worth his while. For example, if you're looking at the potential of just a $10,000 settlement and it's federal, the attorney may not make any money if all he's collecting is $3,000. 30% of $10,000.
Right.
So you're going to have very substantial damages to really make it worth the money.
Yes. And countless lives were damaged because of Len Davis's corruption. And today's story, it was full of intrigue and, danger and risk and luck and all of those things. But the kind of less public side of this is that there are people who have sat in jail because Len Davis lied about why they were arrested.
Quite true.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in next week's episode, we are going to talk about one of those particular cases. Okay, because it has only been just as recently as this year, 2023, that certain things were found out and some people were released because of what was found out about Len Davis's corruption.
Yes, quite a bit was found out about Len Davis's corruption.
Yes.
Yes.
Do you want to talk about the day that Len Davis was arrested? You were around at that time.
Major shockwaves throughout the department, even if you were just a reserve officer. This is a quote from Harry Potter: "No one is who they appear to be," and that was one of those revelations. Someone who you thought, well, all the bad things you heard about them, you thought was just people who were disgruntled, criminals who were angry at him, families of criminals who were angry at him for putting their loved one in jail. Many of us in the department believe that that's all what it was. Why? Because we didn't witness what he was doing firsthand.
Right.
And he was bold, he was daring, and he made lots of good arrests. So now, under ordinary circumstances, if an officer is bold and daring and really wants to take criminals off the street, take drugs off the street, they're going to generate complaints.
Okay.
But this is one example of an officer who was truly a criminal himself.
Well, like you said, organized crime.
Yeah, a violent mobster type of sociopath.
Yes.
Who was a gangster with a badge, and I mean, I could remember the day it happened. I really couldn't stop thinking about it, and I had trouble sleeping that night. That's just how I was only acquainted with him. I met him on a few occasions, mostly in passing.
Right. Like you never sat down and had a beer with him or something like that.
No, we weren't friends.
Right. Well, we'll be glad you weren't friends with him.
Yeah, as I could have possibly ended up
being recruited.
Yeah, work in that warehouse.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in a possible situation, whereas you don't know what's happening, you just go in the warehouse, and then all of a sudden you find out something you didn't want to know, and your hands are dirty.
Your hands are dirty.
All of a sudden. And you're faced with the question of, do I bite the hand that feeds me?
Right.
Which is always a difficult proposition and a tricky, very tricky and sticky proposition.
Ooh, maybe
Of being a whistleblower in a metropolitan police department, you're talking dangerous business.
Yes, and this, and as we know now, this warehouse operation didn't just spring up out of the ground. This was an FBI cover. Okay.
Yep.
JJ was a plant.
Yep.
He was an undercover agent who very happily helped these officers to acquire a warehouse, a van, cell phones, right?
Yep.
And JJ and Terry Adams are really the real heroes here. Terry Adams decided he didn't want to be extorted anymore. And what does he do? He tips off the FBI.
Yeah. Terry Adams undertakes a very dangerous role that requires quite a bit of bravery.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Being the CI who gets involved in the operation from the very front of it. Very sticky proposition.
Yes, but it was the morally correct thing to do.
Yes.
Okay, and I mean, and it's dangerous. If you get found out, you're dead.
Yes.
And Len Davis would know exactly how to make it look like it was a justified shooting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, he would know exactly how to do that.
He sure would. Yeah.
So, this is a very delicate dance that was being done with these informants. And, I wish I could find more stories like this that are due to informants going out there and taking this chance.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, so just remember that, even somebody like Terry Adams can be redeemed.
Yeah. You can. That is a redemption story here.
Yes, you can always do the right thing.
Yeah. It's never too late to redeem yourself.
And on that note, dear listeners, we are going to get going for now. We will talk to you next week. Be safe, be kind. Remember that we're all human beings. Don't park next to vans.
And if you are being questioned by law enforcement in a professional capacity and you're not the victim or the witness to a crime, lawyer up. Negotiate your own best possible outcome. And if it is dark, it is dangerous, and
there's a warehouse,
you don't feel safe,
and there's a warehouse,
don't be there in the first place, especially if it is a nefarious operation. And if you are ever asked to guard a warehouse, vet the company that's requested, or the people that's asking you to do so, and vet the company that owns the warehouse.
And also remember this. I wouldn't be surprised if the feds were able to make fake Google results.
Yes.
So maybe the better option here is to try not to do crime.
Yes.
Try not to do crime.
Yes. If your parents ever asked you to stay out of trouble, don't just dismiss it as just some cliche. Stay out of trouble is not a cliche. It's words to live by.
It is. All right, dear listeners, until next time.